Hello, my American Studies 340 students. This is Professor Donald Earl Collins. Today I just want to go over your syllabus and go over expectations in this course. This is not quite the way I plan on doing this course. When I first started putting together this course as a proposed course over a year ago. I think I might have said this in a previous iteration. This course was originally just going to be about blacks and the history of American education. But I was strongly encouraged to try to include other groups, so that's race and American education and critical perspectives of such. So it means that I don't get to while the majority of the course is really going to deal with African American history and revolving around the education of African Americans in the United States in terms of the fight for education, the fight for equality, the fight for equity, fight for desegregation, and so on and so forth, because let's face it, blacks are pretty much the prime movers in all of educational reform. That's not an exaggeration. Prime movers means primary, right? More than half. Does not mean that Latinx folks, does not mean that Puerto Ricans or Chicanos or Native Americans or other groups didn't contribute. They certainly have. We'll talk about that in this course. But the truth is, the course will be focused primarily, meaning more than half, probably 60%, on the contributions of blacks to the development of modern American education, to the in terms of how it's been shaped, its pitfalls, the tension between social control and social equality / social justice / making education a level playing field, and all of that. So again, I'm saying that to say that that's how I've developed the course. So it will have that focus, but it won't neglect in any way, shape, or form the contributions of Native Americans, of indigenous folk, of Latinx folk, of different groups of Asians, of different groups of folks of color over time to this conversation around perspectives of American education. So what's this course, in terms of both my expectations of both the syllabus, this course is primarily about this tension, this reality that education is not a level playing field. If you don't know that by now, I hope you do, but you will learn it. If you don't know it, that's part of the point of the course. And in how many ways and shapes and forms it is and isn't a form of social control. It is not the great equalizer that people claim it to be. It is not a meritocracy, despite all the testing that takes place in it. American education was originally designed, the modern form of American education, K-16, is designed to sort people out, to exclude people from the best parts of itself. Meaning the more rigorous, more challenging, more eye-opening forms of the curriculum that you can have at the K-12 and college level was originally designed to be for the people who exhibited the most sort of acumen for it. In other words, the smartest folks, the so-called smartest folks. In the way that you determine intelligence primarily through testing was the way that you designed this system. And so a lot of people got excluded, not just black folks, right? A lot of white folks got excluded, particularly white ethnics, right? So if you're Italian or if you're Greek or if you were Polish or Russian, non-Jewish Russian, if you're a German Catholic or an Irish Catholic, you came into the public school setting in the second half of the 19th century, in the first 20 or 30 years of the 20th century, with the expectation that maybe you would finish what we now call junior high school and get a certificate at the end of 7th or 8th grade. And that was it. At one point in time, this is 100 years ago, we're talking 1920, only 6% of the American populace attended college. The vast majority of those folks who attended college were men, right? So excluded a lot of women too. Only 1 in 5 students who started kindergarten or first grade were expected to finish high school, 20%. I am old enough, and I'm just 50, folks, not 80. I'm old enough to have gone to high school and graduated with someone in my class who was 88 years old. Yes, you heard that right. When I graduated in 1987, I graduated with someone who was born in 1899. He dropped out of high school and decided at the ripe old age of 87 years old to go back and finish his last year of high school so he could get his high school diploma. So with all of us 17 and 18 and I think one or two 19-year-olds graduated with us an 88-year-old person in 1987. Why? Because literally 80% of the American population who attended school were never expected to finish high school, and so only 1 in 5 ended up finishing high school in 1920. So that gives you some idea of the evolution of the system that we have. And so that's the kind of stuff around inequality, around race, around gender to some extent. We'll talk a little bit about it, but we won't get too far into that. Certainly around class and race is involved in this whole process of K-12, K-16 education. So we're going to cover a lot of that. And that means that some of the stuff in this course is pretty sensitive. So, for instance, we're going to talk a little bit about affirmative action, right? If you have grounds for opposing affirmative action, fine, but if one of your grounds is that blacks are less intelligent than whites, then I don't know what to say to that. We're not going to spend time discussing things like whether blacks are just as intelligent as whites. That's not going to be part of our classroom discussion. If you believe that, that's fine. I don't know what to tell you there, but that's not part of the discussion. Any discussion that revolves around saying that whole groups can be written off because of their test scores is not part of this discussion, right? It's not, you can talk about freedom of speech all you want, but, it's my course, and I want people to be comfortable in this course and not feel like they're being assailed by other students or being lumped by other students or stereotyped by other students. So please, if you want to discuss the merits of something like affirmative action or ability grouping or whether we need a grading system or not, please don't inject your implicit bias, your unacknowledged racism, if you will, into the process of talking about this stuff in this course. I want to have a discussion that revolves around what we can do to make education more equitable, where the fault lines around racism and classism and sexism are within our education system in general. But I don't think that it's productive to have a discussion in which someone has decided that, well, affirmative action doesn't work because blacks just can't handle being at elite institutions, when the evidence is the opposite. It has been the opposite. It was the opposite even before affirmative action was a policy, and it's opposite now. Really. I mean, my point is that we want to have a discussion that's based on evidence, that's based on, the actual evidence that we have about what's going on in the system. And we can get that from the readings. We can get that from stuff that we're watching in this course. We can get that from doing research. And so I want to implore you to not fall into easy stereotypes, easy ways of criticizing a system that it was never set up to really fully be equal for everyone. That it's not a level playing field, and there's very much racism as part of that process. So I want to spend the next few minutes going over the syllabus real quick, right? You have basically the general expectation that you'll do roughly about 100 pages worth of reading a week. You have 4 books. None of your books are 200 pages long. 2 of your books are barely 100 pages. They're there to give more context to particular topics for different groups, whether it's the forced assimilation of boarding schools for Native Americans, or the stereotype of Korean students among East Asian students of being model minorities educationally, that they can overcome whatever the American system of education throws at them, whether it's about African American achievement or black achievement and how the system has failed and how folks have, despite the failures of the system, have overcome it, or whether we're talking about lower education and a rise of corporatized or corporate education reform, both at the K-12 level and in higher ed in terms of for-profit education. Those are your books. You will have 2 papers to do based on those books and other readings for weeks 4 and weeks 10 in this course. You will have 3 reflections to do about different phases that you're at in this course. You'll have one for week 1, one for week 7, and one for the end of the course. And you have a research paper project that you can either do as an individual or as part of, with one other person as part of a group. You will have introductions to do the first week and under the discussion tab within Blackboard to really introduce yourself, to really give people a chance to get to know you. I want to reserve as much time during our Zoom time portion of this course on Thursdays from 5:30 to 6:30 or so every week so that we can have robust discussions. If you are, however, uncomfortable with doing those kinds of discussions week in and week out, and you are a little gun shy, have a little anxiety around those kinds of interactions, please send me the questions you have. Please send me whatever comments you have so that I can be your voice, so I can voice that for you. Say that so-and-so has a question or a comment or a burning idea that they'd like to share, and I'm just sharing it on their behalf. I might ask you to elaborate, I might not, but in other words, try to contribute somehow to the process of discussion. It's the only part of the course in which you will receive a grade during the run of the course. Every other part of the course is ungraded. And all ungraded really means is that you're getting qualitative feedback. You'll get qualitative feedback on your papers. You'll get qualitative feedback on your reflections. You'll get qualitative feedback on your research paper project and on your presentations. And we'll go over all the research portion of the course and the presentation portion of the course a lot more in the coming weeks. I don't want to spend time on that week 1. I want to get you ready and energized to do this first week. But all ungrading really means is this: you will not get a grade. I will not hint at a grade. I will not tell you a grade. We will meet to discuss your grades at different portions of the course, around the midterm part of the course, middle of the term, so around between weeks 7, 8, and 9. And then toward the end of the course, weeks 14, 15, and 16, you want to discuss how well you've done in those portions of the course. Fine. I will ask what you think your grade is. I will take that into account and determine your final grade when I determine your final grade. But I will not tell you what your grade is. You will not at any point in time know beyond your discussion grade your grade. I will tell you if you're doing well. I will tell you need to pick it up. I will tell you if you're falling behind. But I am not, by rule, if you're ungraded in a class, tell you what your grade is, because that will defeat the whole purpose. I've done this twice. It has worked really well twice. Most students who do this end up with A's or A minuses because they're doing the work. They're putting forth the effort, and they have higher expectations of themselves, generally speaking, than if I were just giving them grades. And they seem to take the feedback I've given them far more seriously than just looking for the grade going, I got a 95. I don't need to do anything else, right? I want this to be about your learning. I want this to be about your learning more about perspectives of race and education in the U.S. over the course of the last 150 or so years. I want this to be about that evolution and your evolution and through the readings, through discussions, through that process. I don't want this to be about trying to impress me. I don't want this to be about trying to impress your classmates with how smart you are. I want this to be about your learning. And so ungrading makes that possible. And so as much as I can emphasize self-discipline, self-motivation in an online setting, I just want to emphasize that as much as I'm going to be, and I'm going to be very flexible in a lot of respects. I'm standing by this. This is one thing I'm not going to be flexible if you're not getting a grade until sometime after like December 9th or 10th of this year. You're not getting a full grade toward this course. So hopefully we can discuss your anxiety around this, but it should be okay because it has been okay for your peers over the last couple of semesters.